Did you know the US Air Force accidentally dropped 2 nuclear bombs on North Carolina that are technically still sitting in the mud right now? Or that there is a zone of death in Yellowstone National Park where you can theoretically commit a crime and get away with it due to a bizarre legal loophole? From the government officially declaring pizza a vegetable to the Pentagon maintaining a serious, unclassified military strategy for surviving a zombie apocalypse, we are exposing the weirdest side of the USA. These are 111 of the dumbest, most absurd, and 100% true facts about America that history class definitely left out. Hit that subscribe button because you have to see this to believe it. 1. You probably think you know where the East Coast is, but your geography teacher lied to you. Most people assume Maine is the easternmost state in America because it looks that way on a flat map. But Alaska is actually the ultimate trickster. The Aleutian Islands stretch so far out into the ocean that they cross the 180th meridian. This line separates the Western Hemisphere from the Eastern Hemisphere. Because those icy islands cross that invisible line, Alaska is technically the most eastern state in the entire United States. It is also the most western and the most northern state all at the same time. If you want to visit the true East, you need a heavy coat and a boat, not a lobster roll. 2. If you are planning a road trip through the South, you better watch your mouth or you might end up in trouble. The state of Arkansas takes its name very seriously, so it is strictly illegal to mispronounce the name Arkansas while you are standing within the state borders. The state code actually has a section written in 1881 that declares the only correct pronunciation is with a silent S at the end. If you walk into a bar in Little Rock and say Arkansas, you are technically breaking the law. It sounds like a joke, but legislators were tired of people butchering their heritage. While police probably will not handcuff you for a slip of the tongue, the locals will definitely judge you for your linguistic crimes. 3. You might think zombies are just for movies, but the Pentagon takes them deadly seriously. In 2011, the United States military actually created a detailed strategy called Con Plan 8888 to save us all from the Walking Dead. This isn't a joke. It is a real, unclassified document that outlines how soldiers should maintain law and order if flesh-eating ghouls attack. The planners didn't want to use a fake country for training scenarios because it might cause a diplomatic incident, so they just decided to use zombies instead. Now, if you see a rotter shambling down your street, just remember, your tax dollars have already paid for a plan to take it out. 4. Andrew Jackson was a tough president known for duels, but his pet parrot was even tougher and much ruder. When the former president died in 1845, thousands of people gathered for a somber funeral to pay their final respects. Suddenly, the quiet ceremony was interrupted by a stream of absolute filth screaming from Jackson's pet parrot named Pole. The bird had learned its vocabulary from the president himself, and it unleashed a barrage of profanity so intense that the funeral director had to physically remove the bird from the service. It is truly the most American way to leave this world with your pet cursing out your mourners. 5. If you ever wanted to convince your mom that pizza is healthy, the United States Congress has legally got your back. In 2011, our brilliant leaders passed a spending bill that officially classified the tomato paste on a slice of pizza as a vegetable serving for school lunches. They did this to protect the frozen food industry, which did not want to lose money if schools switched to healthier options. So, according to the federal government, a cheesy, greasy slice of pepperoni pizza is nutritionally similar to eating a salad. This is why school lunches in America remain a culinary disaster that baffles the rest of the world. 6. You probably have a stack of red plastic cups in your pantry right now and you do not think twice about them. But to the rest of the world, the red Solo cup is a symbol of American partying that is almost mythical. People in countries like Australia and Germany actually throw American-themed parties where the main decoration is just these red cups. They think we drink out of them for every meal because they see them in every single Hollywood movie about college. It is hilarious that our cheap disposable trash has become a cultural icon of freedom and fun for teenagers across the globe. 7. The United States government is famously bad with money, but the existence of the penny is the ultimate proof of stupidity. It currently costs the mint about 2.7 cents to manufacture a single 1-cent coin. That means we are literally losing millions of dollars every single year just to make small brown change that nobody even wants. People mostly throw them in jars or leave them on the ground because they are worthless. Canada was smart enough to get rid of their penny years ago, but we keep making them just to annoy cashiers and waste tax money on zinc and copper discs. 8. You might laugh at the idea of 30 to 50 feral hogs, but the American South is legitimately losing a war against pigs. There are over 6 million wild super pigs roaming the country, and they are tearing up everything in their path. These beasts are massive, aggressive, and smart enough to avoid traps, causing over $1.5 billion in damage every single year. They destroy crops, ruin lawns, and even attack hikers who wander into the wrong patch of woods. It sounds like a bad horror movie, but an army of pigs is slowly conquering Texas, and we are powerless to stop them. 9. Every time you use Google Maps to find the nearest Taco Bell, you are technically using a military weapon. The entire global positioning system that the whole world relies on is owned and operated solely by the United States Space Force, while we nicely let everyone else use it for free. The military can technically shut it down or degrade the signal whenever they want. If a major war ever started, the United States could flip a switch and suddenly every Uber driver and airline pilot in the world would be flying blind. It is a terrifying amount of power to hold over the daily commute. 10. The 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis was widely considered the dumbest sporting event in human history. The race was a total disaster, where the winner actually hitched a ride in a car for 11 miles before crossing the finish line. Another runner stopped to take a nap in the middle of the race because he ate rotten apples. A different guy was chased off the course by a pack of wild dogs and nearly died. Instead of water, the organizers gave the runners rat poison and brandy to boost their energy. It was less of a race and more of a circus act. 11. San Francisco has always been a magnet for weirdos, but in 1859 they really outdid themselves. A failed businessman named Joshua Norton simply declared himself Emperor of the United States, and the city just went along with it. Instead of locking him up, the police officers saluted him in the streets, and newspapers published his imperial decrees. He even printed his own currency, which local restaurants actually accepted as valid payment for his meals. When he died, 30,000 people attended his funeral to honor America's only monarch. It proves that if you act confident enough, Americans will believe literally anything you say. 12. We like to think of ourselves as the world leaders in science and technology, but the data says otherwise. According to a shocking study by the National Science Foundation, 1 in 4 Americans is completely unaware that the Earth orbits the Sun. That means 25% of the population thinks we are living in a stationary world, while the Sun spins around us like a disco ball. It is genuinely terrifying that in the age of spaceships and satellites, millions of people still do not understand the basic mechanics of the solar system. Maybe we should spend less on missiles and more on telescopes. 13. Time travel is technically impossible unless you live in a very specific freezing part of Alaska. If you stand on Little Diomede Island, you can look across the water and see Big Diomede Island, which is owned by Russia. Even though they are only 2.4 miles apart, the Russian island is 21 hours ahead in time because the international dateline runs right between them. You can literally stare at tomorrow while standing in yesterday, which is the weirdest geography fact ever. If you shouted loud enough across the water, you could spoil the future for the Americans behind you. 14. Bureaucracy in the United States is famous for solving problems that do not actually exist. The state of Oklahoma has a very strict law on the books that explicitly prohibits the act of whaling within its borders. This is objectively hilarious because Oklahoma is completely landlocked and sits about 1,000 miles away from the nearest ocean. Unless whales evolve legs and decide to hike through the Great Plains, the majestic creatures are probably safe. It seems some lawmakers just wanted to cover every single base, no matter how impossible or ridiculous the scenario might actually be in reality. 15. Wars have started for many terrible reasons, but only America almost nuked Britain over some bacon. In 1859, an American farmer on San Juan Island shot a British pig that was eating his potatoes. This petty barnyard dispute escalated so quickly that both nations sent fully armed warships and hundreds of soldiers to the island for a standoff. They spent months aiming cannons at each other, all because of one dead hog in a garden. It is known as the Pig War, and it remains the dumbest reason 2 global superpowers almost slaughtered each other in history. 16. We expect our presidents to be dignified and serious, but John Quincy Adams was a total wild card. The sixth president of the United States had a bizarre morning ritual where he would wake up at 5 in the morning and go skinny dipping in the Potomac River. He stripped completely naked and floated around near the White House while his bewildered guards watched from the shore. It is hard to imagine a modern president casually swimming in the nude without causing a national scandal. Adams was clearly just living his best life before the invention of swim trunks ruined his freedom. 17. If you thought the government only taxed your income, you have clearly never heard of the Raisin Police. For decades, the United States government legally seized a massive percentage of every raisin crop grown in America to toss into a national raisin reserve. They stockpiled millions of pounds of dried grapes in secret warehouses just to artificially inflate the prices at the grocery store. Farmers were furious that their hard work was being stolen and hidden away in caves. The Supreme Court finally ended this madness in 2015, proving that even the government cannot hoard all the snacks forever. 18. If you walk down the street grinning at people in Europe, they will probably think you are deranged. But in the United States, smiling at total strangers is considered mandatory social etiquette, and if you don't do it, you are rude. Researchers believe this habit developed because America is a nation of immigrants who didn't speak the same language, so a smile was the only safe greeting. To the rest of the world, specifically places like Russia, we look like a nation of simpletons who are constantly happy for no reason. We are basically the golden retrievers of the human race. 19. You have spent your whole life calling it paper money, but that is actually a total lie. The cash in your wallet is not paper at all. It is a durable fabric blend of 75% cotton and 25% linen. This is exactly why you can accidentally leave a $20 bill in your jeans pocket and wash it without it disintegrating into mush. If it were actual paper like the rest of the world thinks it would be destroyed instantly. You are technically paying for your groceries with tiny rectangular pieces of high-quality bed sheets. 20. The United States is overrun by invasive species, but this one is entirely the fault of a theater nerd. In 1890, a wealthy man named Eugene Schieffelin decided he wanted to introduce every single bird mentioned in the plays of William Shakespeare to New York City. He released 60 European starlings into Central Park because the bard mentioned them once in Henry IV. Today, those 60 birds have multiplied into 200 million flying pests that destroy crops and crash airplanes. We wrecked our entire ecosystem just because one guy was way too obsessed with English literature. 21. You spend all day scrolling through memes and watching cat videos, but your internet addiction actually started as a weapon. The internet was not invented so you could argue with strangers on Twitter. It was originally a military project called ARPANET, designed to survive a nuclear war. The Department of Defense needed a way for computers to talk to each other even if the Soviets blew up our telephone lines. So every time you post a selfie or stream a movie, you are technically using a demilitarized piece of Cold War apocalyptic technology. It is wild that a tool meant for doomsday is now mostly used for dancing teenagers. 22. Major League Baseball generates billions of dollars, yet the entire sport relies on a bucket of secret dirt. Every single ball thrown in a professional game is rubbed with a very specific type of mud found in a secret location in New Jersey. Before this magic mud is applied, the balls are too glossy and slippery for pitchers to grip safely. For decades, one single family has harvested this goop from a mysterious creek bank that they refuse to identify to the public. It is hilarious that our most advanced sports league would completely collapse without a bucket of magic swamp sludge from Jersey. 23. Australia had a war against emus, but the United States had a much more humiliating defeat against squirrels. In 1822, the state of Indiana was invaded by a massive army of migrating squirrels that destroyed everything in sight. We are not talking about a few cute rodents. We are talking about tens of thousands of squirrels marching across the land like soldiers. They devoured entire cornfields and ruined the livelihood of hundreds of farmers who were powerless to stop them. It was a chaotic, fluffy apocalypse that proved nature can humble even the toughest pioneers if it brings enough friends along. 24. The world loves to joke that Americans are obsessed with fast food, but we are secretly closeted intellectuals. You might be shocked to learn that there are actually far more public libraries in the United States than there are McDonald's restaurants. While it feels like there is a golden arch on every corner, the data proves we care more about books than Big Macs. It is a rare statistic that makes us look sophisticated instead of gluttonous. So, the next time someone calls Americans stupid, just remind them that we have way more places to read for free than places to buy nuggets. 25. Tourists love standing at the Four Corners Monument to take a photo in 4 states at once, but it is a lie. The famous concrete marker where Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado meet was actually placed in the wrong spot due to bad surveying technology. The real geographic intersection is about 1,800 feet away from where everyone takes their selfies. That means millions of people have driven for hours into the desert just to stand in a random patch of dirt that isn't special at all. You paid for a souvenir photo of a lie, but at least the view is nice. 26. Table manners are usually about being polite, but in Gainesville, Georgia, using a fork is literally a crime. In 1961, the town passed a proclamation declaring it illegal to eat fried chicken with anything other than your bare hands. It sounds like an urban legend, but a 91-year-old woman was once jokingly arrested by police for using a fork on her poultry. The law was created as a publicity stunt to promote the local poultry industry, but it is still on the books today. Put down the silverware or face the wrath of the chicken police. 27. The US military is terrified of terrorists getting nuclear weapons, but they are actually the ones dropping them on us. In 1961, the Air Force accidentally dropped 2 massive hydrogen bombs on North Carolina when a plane broke apart mid-air. One of the bombs went through all of its arming steps except for a single safety switch that prevented it from detonating. If that one cheap switch had failed, a nuclear explosion would have turned the East Coast into a radioactive wasteland. The bombs are still buried deep in the mud today because the government decided it was too dangerous to dig them up. 28. We remember Abraham Lincoln for his tall hat and the Emancipation Proclamation, but he was also a total jock. Before he became president, Lincoln was an absolute beast in the wrestling ring and is now in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Historians estimate he competed in about 300 matches over 12 years, and he only lost a single one. He was known for trash-talking his opponents and using his long arms to choke slam people into the dirt. It is wild to imagine our most dignified leader throwing people around in a ring like a 19th century Hulk Hogan. 29. You might think you love cheese, but you will never love it as much as the United States government does. Deep underground in converted limestone caves in Missouri, the government is hoarding over 1 billion pounds of surplus cheese. This massive stockpile exists because the government buys dairy to support farmers and then has nowhere to put it all. It is literally a subterranean fortress filled with cheddar that nobody is eating. If the apocalypse ever happens, at least the survivors will have enough nachos to last for 1,000 years. It is the cheesiest and weirdest conspiracy that is 100% true. 30. Visiting a restaurant in America is the only time you are expected to pay the employee's salary yourself. The United States is one of the only countries where tipping is mandatory because businesses are allowed to pay waiters almost nothing. It completely baffles tourists who just want to eat a burger without doing a math equation at the end of the meal. If you don't tip, you are essentially stealing labor from the person who brought you your food. It is a broken system that turns dinner into a guilt trip, but we are all too awkward to stop doing it. 31. If you pay for lunch with a $2 bill, the cashier might look at you like a criminal. Many Americans are convinced these bills are rare or discontinued, but they are actually totally valid legal tender. The Treasury prints millions of them, yet people hoard them in drawers thinking they will be worth a fortune someday. We treat normal money like it is a magical artifact just because we rarely see it. There are true stories of people getting the police called on them for using legal cash because young clerks thought it was fake Monopoly money. It is the only currency we are too scared to actually spend. 32. You are probably terrified of getting eaten by a shark every time you step into the ocean, but your real enemy is in the barn. Statistically speaking, you are far more likely to be killed by a cow in the United States than by a great white. While sharks kill about 1 person a year, cows kill around 20 people by kicking or crushing them. We make terrifying blockbuster movies about Jaws in the water, but nobody is making horror films about Bessie the heifer. The gentle giants of the pasture are actually secret assassins waiting for you to drop your guard. Never trust a creature that weighs a literal ton. 33. We take immense pride in the fact that we planted the American flag on the moon, but the universe has played a cruel joke on us. The iconic Star-Spangled Banner that Neil Armstrong left behind has likely been completely bleached white by decades of harsh solar radiation. Since there is no atmosphere to protect the fabric, the red and blue dyes have totally disintegrated. This means that if aliens ever land there, they will find a plain white flag, which is the international symbol of surrender. We went all the way to space to claim victory and accidentally left a symbol that says we give up. 34. In most countries, university sports are just a hobby, but in America, they are a massive religion that eclipses everything else. It is genuinely insane that our college football stadiums are often significantly larger than our professional NFL stadiums. The Big House at the University of Michigan can hold over 107,000 screaming fans on a Saturday. That is a bigger population than most American cities all gathered to watch unpaid teenagers chase a ball. We prioritize amateur athletics so much that we build modern coliseums for kids who still have to worry about passing their biology midterms the next morning. 35. The man who killed Abraham Lincoln's assassin was not a cool action hero, but a mentally unstable hatter named Boston Corbett. He became a national celebrity for shooting John Wilkes Booth, but his backstory was incredibly disturbing. Years before the war, Corbett had casually castrated himself with a pair of scissors because he thought he was tempted by prostitutes. He did not even go to the hospital afterwards, he just went to a prayer meeting and ate dinner. It is wild that the avenger of our greatest president was a guy who took self-discipline way too far. History is definitely stranger than fiction. 36. You might think Americans are well-traveled explorers, but the statistics show that we mostly just stay home. Only about 40 to 45% of Americans actually own a valid passport, which means the majority cannot legally leave the country. Most people here are perfectly content to never see the rest of the world because America is so huge. You can experience deserts, mountains, and beaches without ever dealing with customs or learning a new language. While the rest of the world goes on gap years, we are happy just driving to Florida. It explains why we are so confused by the metric system. 37. Most towns try to sound exciting to attract tourists. But one place in Oregon decided to lean into being totally uninteresting. The town of Boring, Oregon is a real place that formed an official partnership called the League of Extraordinary Communities. They teamed up with the village of Dull in Scotland and the Shire of Bland in Australia. It is the most aggressively unexciting alliance in the history of the world. They celebrate their collective mediocrity with a sense of humor that most cities lack. If you are looking for a thrill, these are definitely the last 3 places on Earth you should ever visit. 38. Halloween is supposed to be about chaos and candy, but the town of Southington, Connecticut hates your fun. The local government passed a strict ban on silly string, making it illegal to buy or use the colorful spray within town limits. Apparently, the stuff was making too much of a mess during parades, and the cleanup crew was tired of scraping it off the sidewalks. If you are caught spraying this foam at your friends, you could face a fine. It is the only place in America where a can of party string is treated like illegal contraband during the spooky season. 39. The Cold War made the CIA do some truly insane things, but Operation Acoustic Kitty takes the prize. The intelligence agency spent 5 years and $20 million surgically implanting a microphone into a cat to spy on the Soviets. They thought the cat could wander near park benches and record secret conversations without anyone noticing. On its very first field test, they released the bionic cat onto the sidewalk, and it was immediately run over by a taxi. $20 million of taxpayer money was instantly squandered because nobody remembered that cats are terrible at following orders and watching for traffic. 40. The US Senate is full of old people arguing about laws, but they also have a secret sweet tooth. Since 1968, there has been a specific desk on the Senate floor known as the candy desk. It is traditionally occupied by a senator who is responsible for keeping it stocked with chocolates and sweets for their colleagues. When the debates get boring or long, our powerful leaders sneak over to grab a sugar rush like naughty school children. It is comforting to know that the people deciding our future are fueled by Snickers bars and jelly beans, just like the rest of us. 41. You might assume that adults understand basic biology, but a surprising number of Americans are confused about cows. A survey by the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy revealed that 7% of American adults genuinely believe chocolate milk comes from brown cows. That equals roughly 16 million people who think there is a magical breed of cattle that lactates sugary cocoa instead of regular white milk. It is a stunning display of agricultural ignorance that proves we are completely disconnected from our food sources. If you are one of these people, please go visit a farm immediately before you embarrass yourself in public. We really need to fund our science classes better. 42. Buying a single pack of gum at a pharmacy shouldn't require destroying a small forest, but CVS disagrees. Their receipts have become a legendary internet meme because they are often longer than a human toddler. You can buy one bottle of aspirin and receive a 4-foot-long scroll of paper filled with coupons you will never use. It has become a running joke that you can use a CVS receipt as a scarf or wallpaper for your bathroom. While the world tries to go paperless, this one company is single-handedly keeping the thermal paper industry in business. It is the most wasteful and hilarious shopping experience in America. 43. The American dream is fueled by plastic cards and money that we do not actually have. The average American is currently carrying over $6,000 in revolving credit card debt that they cannot pay off. We are a nation addicted to swiping now and worrying about the consequences later, which keeps the banks incredibly rich. It is a financial trap where people buy things they do not need to impress people they do not like using money they haven't earned. If you feel broke, just remember that your neighbor with the shiny new car is probably drowning in high-interest payments, just like everyone else on your block. 44. You probably think tigers live in the jungles of Asia, but the real jungle is actually Texas. There are currently more tigers living in captivity in the state of Texas than there are roaming wild in the entire rest of the world. Private citizens can buy these dangerous predators and keep them in their backyards like oversized house cats. It is a terrifying reality that your neighbor might have a 500-pound killing machine sitting next to their barbecue grill. The lack of regulation means that the Lone Star State is accidentally the tiger capital of the world. It is the ultimate example of American freedom gone wrong. 45. If you see a chainsaw, you probably think of lumberjacks or horror movies, but its origin is much bloodier. The chainsaw was not invented to cut down trees. It was originally created by doctors to help with difficult childbirths. In the days before C-sections became safe, surgeons used a hand-cranked chainsaw to slice through a woman's pelvic bone to widen the birth canal. It is a horrifying medical fact that makes every horror movie seem tame by comparison. The tool was only used on wood years later when someone realized it was better at cutting timber than it was at sawing through human skeletons. 46. Americans are experts at naming things to make ourselves sound more important than we actually are. We proudly host the World Series of Baseball every year, even though the rest of the world is not invited. The only teams that compete are from the United States and one single team from Canada, which hardly counts as a global tournament. We literally crowned ourselves world champions for a century without ever playing against Japan or Cuba or the Dominican Republic. It is the ultimate ego trip to hold a domestic tournament and declare yourself the ruler of the entire planet. We really just love winning our own made-up trophies. 47. Dueling with pistols is dangerous enough, but two men in 1808 decided to make it even crazier. Two Frenchmen got into a love triangle and decided to settle it by fighting a duel in hot air balloons over Paris. They floated up into the sky and one man used a blunderbuss to shoot a hole in the other man's balloon. The loser plummeted to the earth and died in the crash, while the winner floated away victorious. American newspapers sensationalized this story for years, proving that men have been doing incredibly stupid things for women since the dawn of flight. It was aerial combat long before airplanes existed. 48. You might think Santa lives at the North Pole, but he actually has 3 summer homes in America. There are 3 different towns in the United States officially named Santa Claus, located in Indiana, Georgia, and Arizona. The town in Indiana is famous for receiving thousands of letters from children every Christmas, which volunteers answer faithfully. It is a bizarre experience to drive through the desert of Arizona and suddenly find yourself in a place named after a snowy fat man. We love the holidays so much, we literally put them on the map. It is the only time of year when living in a fantasy world is acceptable. 49. Geography usually makes sense, but the town of Point Roberts, Washington is a total glitch in the Matrix. This small piece of American land hangs off the bottom of a Canadian peninsula and is not connected to the US. To drive to work or school, the residents have to cross the international border into Canada and then drive back into the US. It means kids have to carry passports just to go to their own high school every day. It is a logistical nightmare created because old mapmakers drew a straight line without looking at where the water actually was. It is the loneliest town in America. 50. You might think laws are only for real things, but Washington State disagrees with your logic. In Skamania County, it is a felony to kill Bigfoot, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. The local government passed the Bigfoot Protection Act in 1969 to prevent hunters from shooting the legendary ape. They take this imaginary creature so seriously that they wrote actual legal code to protect its life. If you ever find yourself in the woods of Washington, make sure you do not shoot anything hairy, or you might end up in a cell next to a guy who robbed a bank. 51. The US military has had some terrible ideas, but the bat bomb was definitely the wildest one of all. During World War II, a dentist convinced the president to strap tiny napalm canisters to thousands of hibernating Mexican free-tailed bats. The plan was to drop them over Japanese cities where they would roost in attics and burn everything down. In a test run, the bats woke up early and accidentally burned down the entire American airbase instead of the enemy target. It sounds like a joke, but millions of dollars were spent trying to weaponize flying rodents before we gave up. We literally firebombed ourselves with bats. 52. Thomas Jefferson is remembered as a genius founding father who wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he was also a clumsy lover. When he was young and trying to impress a married woman named Maria Causeway, he decided to show off his athleticism. He tried to jump over a tall fence to look cool, but he tripped and shattered his wrist instead. The injury was so bad that he was in pain for the rest of his life and had to learn to write with his left hand. It proves that even the smartest men in history turn into total idiots when they are around a pretty girl. 53. You probably think you are eating pure dairy when you sprinkle cheese on your tacos, but you are actually eating wood. If you check the ingredients on a bag of shredded cheese, you will see a word called cellulose listed on the back. That is a fancy scientific name for wood pulp or sawdust, which manufacturers add to keep the cheese shreds from clumping together. Companies are literally feeding you the same stuff that you sweep up off the floor of a wood shop. It is a brilliant scam to sell you cheaper filler while you happily pay full price for premium cheddar at the grocery store. 54. The entire planet agrees that the metric system is the best way to measure things, except for 3 stubborn countries. The United States stands proudly alongside Liberia and Myanmar as the only nations that refuse to officially adopt the meter and the gram. We would rather struggle with fractions of an inch and cups of flour than admit that multiplying by 10 is easier. It costs our industries billions of dollars in conversion errors and crashed a Mars orbiter once. We are basically the old grandpa of the world who refuses to learn how to use a smartphone because the old way works just fine for us. 55. We love to brag that we have the best medical technology in the world, but the numbers tell a very different story. The United States spends significantly more money on healthcare per person than any other country on the entire planet. You would think this makes us superhumans, but we actually rank roughly 35th in life expectancy globally. We are paying for a luxury limousine and getting a broken bicycle in return. It is the only system where you can go bankrupt just for breaking your leg, while people in other countries get fixed up for the price of a parking ticket. 56. The most iconic symbol of the American Wild West is the lonely tumbleweed rolling across a dusty desert town. You see it in every cowboy movie, but that weed is actually a foreign invader from Russia. It is called Russian thistle, and it did not even arrive in the United States until the 1870s. It hitched a ride in a shipment of flax seeds and quickly took over the entire western landscape. So the classic image of the American frontier is actually just a bunch of dead Russian weeds blowing in the wind. We cannot even claim our own movie props as native to this land. 57. Everyone loves to tell the joke that NASA spent millions developing a space pen while the Russians just used a pencil. It makes Americans look stupid, but using a pencil in zero gravity is actually a death wish. Graphite dust and wood shavings float away and can short-circuit expensive electronics or get inhaled by astronauts. The Russians stopped using pencils too because they did not want their spaceships to catch on fire. The funny story about American wastefulness is actually a myth. because a private company made the pen. The real dumb people are the ones who still believe the pencil meme is true. 58. You might think Batman lives in Gotham City, but there is a real city in Turkey named Batman. In 2008, the mayor of this town actually tried to sue the director Christopher Nolan for using the name without permission. He claimed that the American movie producers were stealing the city's history even though the comic book character had existed for decades. The mayor blamed a string of unsolved murders and high suicide rates on the psychological distress caused by the movie. It was a ridiculous attempt to get money from Hollywood that obviously got thrown out of court immediately by the judge. 59. San Diego was desperate for water during a drought in 1915, so they hired a man named Charles Hatfield. He called himself a rainmaker and promised to fill the reservoirs for $10,000 using a secret chemical mix. He climbed a tower and released his fumes, and suddenly, the skies opened up with a biblical storm. It rained so hard that it destroyed a dam, flooded the city, and washed away houses. The city council refused to pay him because he did his job a little too well. He had to flee town to avoid being lynched by angry, wet locals who lost their homes. 60. The Mall of America in Minnesota is so incomprehensibly massive that it creates its own weather system inside. Despite being located in one of the coldest states in the country, the mall has no central heating system. It stays warm solely from the body heat of thousands of shoppers and the heat generated by the lights. It is basically a giant human oven that traps your warmth to keep the air comfortable. You are technically keeping the person next to you warm just by walking around and buying clothes. It is a terrifying testament to how much energy a crowd of consumers can produce. 61. Maps are usually serious business, but the state of Maine has an island that is literally a failure. Off the coast of Jonesport lies a piece of land officially mapped and recognized as Mistake Island. It isn't a nickname. It is the legal name on government charts because early captains were confused by the fog. The story goes that cartographers labeled it a mistake on the charts and the name just stuck forever. It is hilarious that we live in a country where we were too lazy to rename a geographical error. If you ever feel like a failure, just remember there is an entire island dedicated to being wrong. 62. Elderly people love their bingo nights, but North Carolina is terrified things might get too wild. The state has a very specific law that prohibits any bingo game from lasting longer than 5 hours at a time. Apparently, lawmakers were worried that high-stakes gambling in church basements would turn into marathon sessions of debauchery. It creates a funny image of police raiding a retirement home just because grandma played one too many rounds. They treat a harmless game of chance like it is a dangerous addiction that needs strict government regulation. You better shout bingo quickly before the SWAT team kicks down the doors. 63. You associate cowboys with horses, but the U.S. Army actually tried to turn them into desert nomads. In the 1850s, the military imported dozens of camels to Texas to create the experimental Camel Corps. They thought these humpbacked beasts would be perfect for hauling supplies across the dry American Southwest. The plan failed miserably because the camels smelled terrible and were so aggressive that they terrified the horses and mules. The Army eventually gave up and released them into the wild where they roamed around Texas for years. It is a bizarre chapter of history where the Wild West looked like the Middle East. 64. Presidents usually have dignified morning routines, but Calvin Coolidge was a total weirdo in the bedroom. The 30th President of the United States insisted on having his head rubbed with Vaseline while he ate his breakfast in bed. He believed that the petroleum jelly was good for his health, but he just looked like a greasy mess. Imagine the leader of the free world sitting in his pajamas eating eggs with a shiny, slimy head. It is easily one of the most disturbing images from the White House history books. Being the most powerful man on Earth apparently means you can be as gross as you want. 65. You might think you eat healthy, but the average American diet is basically a candy bar. Studies show that the typical person in the U.S. consumes roughly 17 teaspoons of added sugar every single day. That adds up to about 60 pounds of pure sugar every year, which is enough to fill a bathtub. We hide it in everything from bread to ketchup, so you do not even realize you are eating dessert for dinner. It explains why our healthcare costs are so high and why our teeth are rotting out. We are not just a nation of people, we are walking sugar sculptures. 66. Throwing a party for an unborn baby seems normal to us, but the rest of the world thinks we are cursing the child. In many cultures, celebrating a baby before it arrives is considered incredibly bad luck and tempts fate. They believe you should wait until the baby is safe in your arms before you start opening gifts. But Americans are so obsessed with consumerism that we need to stockpile diapers and strollers months in advance. We turn a fragile medical event into a massive gift grab. To an outsider, a baby shower looks like we are arrogantly assuming everything will go perfectly. 67. The American dream often ends in a courtroom because getting sick is a financial death sentence. Medical bills are currently the #1 cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States, eclipsing credit cards or housing crashes. It is a terrifying reality where surviving cancer means you lose your house and your life savings. We are the only developed nation where a trip to the emergency room requires a credit check and a loan application. You can work hard your entire life and lose it all just because your appendix decided to burst. It is the saddest and dumbest financial system in the modern world. 68. If you live in the South, you know the pain of fire ants, but they are not supposed to be here. These aggressive biting monsters arrived on a cargo ship in Alabama in the 1930s and never left. They are native to South America, but they found the US very comfortable and spread across the country. They have no natural predators here, so they multiply unchecked and attack anyone who steps on their mounds. We accidentally imported a plague because we did not check our shipping crates carefully enough. Now, every summer picnic is a battle for survival against tiny, angry invaders. 69. The world mocks us for using Fahrenheit, but our system actually makes way more sense for humans. Celsius is based on water freezing and boiling, but Fahrenheit is based on how people actually feel outside. In our system, 0 is really cold and 100 is really hot, which is a perfect scale for the weather. In Celsius, the difference between comfortable and dying of heat stroke is only like 10 degrees. We stick to our weird numbers because we care more about human comfort than the freezing point of water at sea level. It is one of the few times our stubbornness is actually logical. 70. The most famous landmark in California was never meant to be a permanent symbol of the movie industry. The Hollywood sign originally said Hollywoodland and was just a temporary tacky advertisement for a new housing development. It was erected in 1923 and was supposed to be torn down after a year and a half. The sign eventually started rotting and falling apart until the city decided to fix it and remove the last 4 letters. We literally worship a piece of leftover real estate spam as a cultural icon. It proves that in America, even our trash can become a national treasure. 71. You probably slather ketchup on your fries without thinking, but in the 1830s, people drank it as medicine. An Ohio doctor named John Cook Bennett convinced the American public that tomatoes were a miracle cure for everything from indigestion to jaundice. He turned ketchup into a concentrated pill and sold it to sick people who were desperate for a cure. For years, people were swallowing condiments hoping to fix their liver problems or cure diarrhea. It was a complete scam that eventually collapsed, but it proves that Americans will buy absolutely anything if you market it as a health supplement. 72. If you look at a map, you naturally assume that California is to the west of Nevada because it touches the ocean. But geography plays tricks on your brain because Reno, Nevada is actually further west than Los Angeles, California, because the North American continent curves inward as it goes south. The City of Angels sits much further east than you realize. If you drove in a perfectly straight line south from Reno, you would actually splash down into the Pacific Ocean long before you ever hit Los Angeles. It is a spatial fact that wins bar bets and confuses tourists. 73. Most laws are written for specific crimes like theft or arson, but Utah decided to be incredibly vague. The state has a specific statute that makes causing a catastrophe a second-degree felony punishable by serious prison time. It sounds like a charge for a comic book supervillain, but it is a real law meant to stop people from using weapons of mass destruction or causing widespread panic. If you accidentally blow up a city block or flood a neighborhood, you are officially a catastrophic criminal. It is the only law that sounds cool until you realize you are going to jail. 74. We love to chant USA and pretend we never lose, but we embarrassed ourselves trying to fight Canada. The United States tried to invade our polite northern neighbors twice during the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. Both times were total humiliations where American soldiers were pushed back by British and Canadian forces. Thomas Jefferson famously said the conquest would be a mere matter of marching, but he was dead wrong. Instead of taking over Canada, we got our capital city burned to the ground. We learned the hard way that you should not mess with people who ride moose. 75. Modern politicians cancel speeches if they have a sore throat. But Teddy Roosevelt was built different. In 1912, an assassin shot Roosevelt in the chest at point-blank range right before a campaign speech. The bullet was slowed down because it had to pass through his metal glasses case and a folded-up 50-page speech in his pocket. Instead of going to the hospital, he stood on stage bleeding and delivered a 90-minute address to the shocked crowd. He famously told them that it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. He was truly the toughest man alive. 76. The French treat cheese like a religion, but Americans treat it like a chemistry experiment. The United States is the only place on Earth where easy cheese is considered a socially acceptable food product. We literally took a dairy product and shoved it into a pressurized aerosol can so we could spray it onto crackers like whipped cream. It barely qualifies as food and contains ingredients that you cannot pronounce, but we eat it anyway. It is the ultimate symbol of American laziness because slicing a block of cheddar with a knife was apparently just too much work for us to handle. 77. If you travel to other countries, you rarely see their flag unless it is on a government building. But in the United States, we are absolutely obsessed with plastering the Star-Spangled Banner on everything we own. We fly massive flags at car dealerships, paint them on our mailboxes, and even print them on our underwear. It is a bizarre level of patriotism where we think disrespecting the flag is bad, but wearing it on your butt is perfectly fine. We act like we might forget which country we live in if we do not see red, white, and blue every 5 seconds. 78. Halloween is supposed to be for children, but Americans have decided to humiliate their animals instead. We spend nearly $500 million every single year buying ridiculous costumes for our dogs and cats. We take majestic descendants of wolves and dress them up as hot dogs and pumpkins for our own amusement. The animals clearly hate it and look miserable in every photo, but we cannot stop ourselves from laughing. It is a massive industry fueled entirely by our desire to get likes on Instagram. Your dog does not want to be a pirate, he just wants you to give him a treat. 79. We spend billions of dollars fighting terrorism and worrying about sharks, but the real killer is in your garage. The United States has the highest rate of ladder-related deaths in the entire developed world. It is largely because of our stubborn do-it-yourself culture where men refuse to pay a professional to fix the roof. Instead of hiring help, we climb up shaky aluminum ladders while holding heavy tools and fall to our doom. We are a nation of confident amateurs who think gravity does not apply to us. The most dangerous weapon in America is actually a dad trying to clean the gutters. 80. If you look at a globe, you would bet money that Florida is the closest state to Africa. But geometry on a sphere is weird, and the correct answer is actually the state of Maine. The Quoddy Head Peninsula in Maine is geographically closer to Morocco than any beach in Miami. It seems impossible because Maine is way up north, but the curvature of the Atlantic Ocean makes it a shorter trip. It is one of those facts that breaks your brain and makes you question everything you learned in school. Maine is basically the African gateway of the United States. 81. Florida is famous for its weird crimes, but the state legislature actually had to pass a law to stop people from throwing little people. In 1989, the state explicitly banned the activity of dwarf tossing in bars and clubs. This barbaric sport involved drunk patrons competing to see who could throw a person the furthest onto a mattress. The law was challenged in court by a dwarf who claimed it violated his right to earn a living, but a judge upheld the ban to protect human dignity. It is a shameful chapter of history that proves Florida has always been the wildest place in America. 82. You expect floods to be made of water, but Boston once drowned in a tidal wave of sticky sugar. In 1919, a massive storage tank burst and sent a 25-foot wave of molasses crashing through the streets at 35 miles per hour. The sticky brown goo demolished buildings, crushed train tracks, and killed 21 people who could not outrun the tsunami. It wasn't a slow leak. It was a violent explosion of syrup that trapped horses and people like flies on sticky paper. Locals claim that on hot summer days, you can still smell the sweet scent of molasses in the North End. 83. The White House is a place of dignity, but William Howard Taft turned the bathroom into a construction zone. President Taft was a massive man weighing over 300 pounds, and one day he got physically stuck in the presidential bathtub. His staff had to use butter and slippery oils to pry the leader of the free world out of the porcelain trap. After that humiliating incident, he ordered a custom oversized tub that could fit 4 grown men inside. There is a famous photo of 4 workers sitting comfortably in his new tub just to prove how gigantic it really was. 84. Americans love peanut butter so much that our consumption stats sound completely made up. We eat enough peanut butter in a single year to completely coat the floor of the Grand Canyon. That is millions of jars of nutty paste being spread on sandwiches and eaten directly from the spoon. It is a distinctly American obsession that confuses Europeans who think the texture is gross and sticky. If we ever needed to pave a road across the country, we could probably just use Skippy and Jif. It is the glue that holds our nation's lunchboxes together. 85. Super Bowl. Sunday is technically about football, but it is really just an excuse to eat like garbage. It is officially the second largest food consumption day in America, right behind Thanksgiving. We consume over 1 billion chicken wings and millions of pounds of chips and dip in a single afternoon. We treat a sporting event like a competitive eating contest where the goal is to induce a food coma before halftime. The plumbing systems in major cities actually struggle to handle the synchronized toilet flushes during the commercial breaks. We are the only country that turns a game into a gluttonous national holiday. 86. Washington, D.C. is the seat of power now, but the capital almost ended up in a random Pennsylvania town. In the early days of the Republic, Congress seriously considered placing the capital in Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. The proposal only failed because a senator from the South didn't want the capital to be that far north. If history had gone differently, the most powerful city on Earth would be a quiet borough that hardly anyone has ever heard of. It is weird to imagine the president living in a farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania instead of the White House. 87. Yellowstone National Park is a beautiful place to visit, but you should probably stay away from the zone of death. There is a 50-square-mile section of the park that sits in Idaho, but falls under the jurisdiction of the Wyoming Federal Court. Because the Constitution says a jury must be from the state and district where the crime was committed, it is theoretically impossible to form a legal jury there. Since nobody lives in that specific patch of wilderness, you could technically commit murder and walk free on a technicality. Please do not test this theory because the government will definitely find a way to lock you up. 88. We all know that wrestling bears is a bad idea, but Alabama had to make it official. The state has a specific law on the books that prohibits bear wrestling matches. This implies that at some point in history there were enough people fighting bears that the government had to intervene. It was once a popular carnival attraction where drunk men would try to pin a muzzled bear for cash prizes. It is a relief that we stopped doing this, but it is hilarious that we needed a law to tell us it was stupid. 89. When a dead whale washed up on an Oregon beach in 1970, officials came up with an explosive solution. They decided the best way to get rid of the carcass was to blow it up with a half-ton of dynamite. They thought the whale would vaporize into tiny pieces that seagulls would eat. Instead, the explosion blasted massive chunks of rotting blubber into the sky, which rained down on the horrified spectators. A huge slab of whale meat even crushed a brand new car parked a quarter-mile away. It remains the most disastrous and disgusting public works project in American history. 90. We are taught that George Washington had wooden teeth, but the truth is much darker and grosser. The first president's dentures were actually a nightmare mix of gold-lead hippopotamus ivory and real human teeth. Historical ledgers show that he purchased teeth from his own slaves and probably from dead soldiers to craft his smile. It creates a horrifying image of our noble leader walking around with a mouthful of other people's teeth wired into his jaw. The wooden teeth story was likely invented to hide the gruesome reality of his dental hygiene. 91. You probably think fortune cookies are an ancient Chinese tradition, but they are actually as American as apple pie. These crunchy little snacks were invented in California around the early 20th century and have absolutely nothing to do with China. If you go to a real restaurant in Beijing and ask for a fortune cookie, the waiter will look at you like you are crazy. They were likely created by Japanese immigrants in San Francisco or Los Angeles to entertain tourists. We took a fake cultural artifact and turned it into a staple of every takeout meal just so we could read vague predictions about our future. 92. The day after Thanksgiving is supposed to be about shopping, but in America, it is basically a combat sport. We have turned Black Friday into a chaotic event where people literally trample each other to death just to save $50 on a flat-screen television. It is so dangerous that there is a legitimate website called the Black Friday Death Count that tracks how many shoppers have died in the aisles. We spend one day being thankful for what we have and immediately spend the next day punching strangers in the face to get more stuff. It is the darkest and most ironic celebration of consumerism imaginable. 93. If you order lobster at a restaurant today, you are paying a premium price for luxury food. But in colonial America, lobster was considered disgusting trash food that was fit only for the poor and the incarcerated. Settlers called them sea cockroaches, and they were so plentiful that they piled up on the beaches and rotted. It was actually considered cruel and unusual punishment to force prisoners to eat lobster more than a few times a week. We essentially tricked ourselves into thinking a bottom-feeding bug is a delicacy just because we started dipping it in butter. History proves that anything can be fancy if you charge enough money. 94. People love to say that things will only happen when hell freezes over, but that actually happens every single year. There is a real town in the state of Michigan named Hell, and the residents absolutely love their demonic reputation. When the harsh winter temperatures drop below freezing, the town officially issues a declaration that hell has frozen over. They have a mayor who can be impeached for a day, and they sell souvenirs that celebrate their fiery name. It is the only place in America where you can tell someone to go to hell, and you are actually just giving them helpful driving directions to a tourist trap. 95. Wisconsin takes its dairy products so seriously that they used to have subjective laws about flavor. For years, the state had a regulation requiring that any cheese sold must be highly pleasing to the taste and free from undesirable flavors. This vague law basically meant that if a government inspector did not personally enjoy your cheddar, it was illegal to sell it. It sounds like a rule made up by a hungry toddler, but it was actual government policy. They are the only people on Earth who treat cheese tasting with the same legal intensity that the rest of the country applies to nuclear weapons inspections. 96. The United States Navy operates the most advanced nuclear submarines in history, but they are steered by video games. The Virginia-class submarines use standard Xbox 360 controllers to operate their photonic periscope masts. The Navy realized that the old joysticks were clunky and cost nearly $40,000 each, while an Xbox controller cost $30 at the mall. Plus, the young sailors already grew up playing Call of Duty, so they know exactly how to use them without training. It is terrifying and hilarious that billions of dollars of military hardware relies on a cheap plastic controller that might suffer from stick drift. 97. Being the President of the United States gives you the power to launch nukes and also the power to ban vegetables. George Herbert Walker Bush hated broccoli with such a burning passion that he officially banned it from being served on Air Force One. He famously declared that he was the President of the United States and he was not going to eat any more broccoli. It caused a minor diplomatic crisis with broccoli farmers who sent truckloads of the vegetable to the White House in protest. It is the ultimate power move to use your executive authority just to avoid eating your greens like a stubborn child. 98. If you order General Tso's chicken, hoping for an authentic culinary experience, you are being scammed. This sticky, sweet fried chicken dish was invented in New York City in the 1970s and is completely unknown in China. The real General Tso was a 19th century military leader who died long before the dish was ever created, and he certainly never ate it. If you serve this sugary meat to his descendants, they would probably be confused and offended. It is another example of Americans taking a foreign concept and covering it in deep fryer batter and sugar until it becomes unrecognizable and delicious. 99. Americans love to use fancy French words to sound sophisticated, but we are using them completely wrong. In the United States, we use the word entree to describe the main course of a meal. But in the French language, the word literally means entrance, and it refers to the appetizer that you eat before the main dish. We are the only country that confidently calls the biggest meal the entrance while the rest of the world laughs at our translation skills. We basically walked into a restaurant, grabbed a dictionary, and decided to rewrite the rules of dining just to suit our own confusion. 100. The Statue of Liberty is the ultimate symbol of American freedom, but we treated it like unwanted junk mail. When France gifted us the massive statue, it arrived in 350 pieces packed into crates. The American government had no money to build the pedestal, so they just left the statue rotting in boxes for an entire year. It was embarrassing until Joseph Pulitzer ran a newspaper campaign begging regular citizens to donate pennies to finish the job. We barely managed to assemble our most famous monument because we were too cheap to buy a base for our giant free present. 101. You might think of Canada as a massive frozen giant that dominates the map of North America. But in terms of actual human beings, the state of California completely crushes the entire country of Canada. There are roughly 39 million people living in the Golden State compared to about 38 million in all of Canada. That means one single US state has a larger population than the second largest country on the entire planet by landmass. It is absolutely wild that we managed to cram that many surfers and tech billionaires into one coastal strip while Canada is just empty snow and moose. 102. Sending a surprise pizza to your friend sounds like a delicious prank, but in Louisiana, it is a crime. The state has a specific law that makes it a finable offense to send a pizza to someone's house without their prior permission. This is officially known as harassment by pizza, and was created to stop people from pranking their exes with unwanted deliveries. It is the only place in the world where a pepperoni pie can legally be considered a weapon of harassment. If you want to feed your friends in the bayou, you better get a signed contract before you call Domino's. 103. The Liberty Bell is a sacred symbol of American independence, but the people who made it were terrible spellers. If you look closely at the inscription on the side of the bell, you will see the word Pennsylvania is spelled wrong. It is missing an N and reads as Pennsylvania, which looks like a typo made by a lazy student. It wasn't actually a mistake at the time because spelling rules were much looser back then, but it looks ridiculous now. We base our entire national identity on a cracked bell that doesn't even know how to spell the name of its own state. 104. Most presidents have a red button on their desk that could launch a nuclear war. But one had a button for soda. Reportedly, Donald Trump had a special wooden box with a red button on the Resolute desk that summoned a butler with a Diet Coke. He was so addicted to the fizzy drink that he needed instant access to caffeine without having to speak a word. It is a hilarious image of executive power where the leader of the free world uses high-tech signaling just to quench his thirst. History will remember the nuclear codes, but we will remember the soda button. 105. The entire world thinks Americans are insane because of how we write the date on a calendar. While everyone else logically goes from smallest to largest using day, month, and year, we decided to mix it up. We put the month first, then the day, and then the year. Because we write it how we say it out loud. It drives computer programmers and international travelers crazy because it makes zero logical sense for sorting files. We are stubbornly holding onto a system that causes confusion every single time we fill out a form just because we like to be different from Europe. 106. You think you can buy land anywhere in America? But the government is actually the biggest landlord in town. In the state of Nevada, the federal government owns roughly 80% of the entire landmass. That means the vast majority of the state is just empty desert and secret testing grounds that you are not allowed to touch. It is basically a giant sandbox for the military to play with bombs and aliens while the locals live in the corners. If you drive through Nevada, you are technically trespassing on Uncle Sam's private property for hundreds of miles of lonely highway. 107. Americans love hamburgers more than life itself, but we almost renamed them because we hated Germany. During World War I, the government tried to rebrand hamburgers as Liberty sandwiches to avoid the German association with the city of Hamburg. It was a petty and ridiculous attempt to erase the origin of our favorite food just to spite our enemies. We did the same thing with sauerkraut, calling it Liberty cabbage because apparently fermented cabbage was too political. It proves that we will literally change the dictionary before we admit that our enemy makes tasty food that we want to eat for lunch. 108. New York City is crowded and expensive, but its backyard is bigger than an actual country. Central Park in Manhattan is geographically larger than the entire Principality of Monaco on the French Riviera. You could fit the entire nation of Monaco inside the park and still have plenty of room left over for hot dog stands. It is a flex that our city park has more square footage than a sovereign nation known for billionaires and casinos. It puts into perspective just how massive America really is when our recreational grass patches are bigger than legitimate European kingdoms on the map. 109. The government tells you to stay away from drugs, but they once deliberately poisoned the supply themselves. During Prohibition, the United States government was angry that people were still drinking industrial alcohol, so they ordered chemists to add poison to it. They knew people would drink it anyway, but they did it to scare them into sobriety. This twisted plan resulted in the deaths of roughly 10,000 American citizens who drank the tainted booze. It remains one of the darkest moments in history where the government decided that killing its own citizens was an acceptable way to enforce a moral law. 110. The US military has spent money on some stupid weapons, but the gay bomb is the undisputed champion. In 1994, the Air Force proposed a non-lethal chemical weapon that would release strong aphrodisiacs over enemy troops. The goal was to make the enemy soldiers irresistibly attracted to one another, so they would stop fighting and start loving. They literally wanted to turn the battlefield into a giant romantic rave to distract the bad guys. The plan was eventually scrapped, but it proves that the Pentagon will try absolutely anything to avoid fighting a normal war with guns. 111. We end this list with the smartest dumb decision in the history of American real estate deals. In 1867, the US bought Alaska from Russia for just 2 cents an acre, and everyone hated it. The American public called it Seward's folly and mocked the government for buying a giant, useless block of ice. They thought it was the dumbest purchase ever until we found billions of dollars in gold and oil underneath the snow. We basically robbed Russia blind and laughed all the way to the bank, proving that sometimes being dumb is actually genius. And there you have it, the ultimate proof that America is officially the weirdest place on Earth. If your brain hurts from all this freedom, smash that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to Dumb History right now. Now tell me in the comments, would you rather be the Emperor of San Francisco or the Mayor of Hell? Let me know down below and click the video on your screen right now to watch more insane history facts that your teachers were too scared to teach you.